You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And of course, I just figured, you know what? We're not doing enough. I don't have this whole little command central thing going on here. So I thought I would add something else. Now, I've been wanting to do this through the Discord for a while, and I think that may be where it ends up, but I ran into this software. I'm trying to test it out. You guys can help me tonight. You can actually call into the show, and I figured this would be a good one because, we're basically dealing with here the whole cancellation of the Acolyte. Before we get into that too, we actually did a show, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something like that. It wasn't that long ago, where Leslie Headland had given this whole interview about what she wants to do in season 2, and we covered it. And of course, I've been flooded with comments on that video, mostly to the negative, almost as if people think it was like a gotcha moment, like we wanted the show to have a season 2 or something. I don't think people understood that. Look, man, she came out with this interview. We're pretty much doing it. That's kind of the way it goes, We're just trying to report on what's been reported on. So now, of course, we're going to talk about the cancellation of the Acolyte period, not just season 2. It's done, and we're going to talk about that and moving forward. But you guys have the opportunity to call in live. Now, again, I don't know exactly how well this thing is going to work. Because again, it's a test thing. And if you guys have anything you want to say or any questions, like how you normally chat in, of course you could still chat in. That's perfectly acceptable, but you do have the ability, at least today, to call in live at 209-312-6491. And we will put you on and take your question or comment or whatever. Which, of course, is a dangerous thing to do without actually having a call screen. Part of the thing on this software is there actually is some call screening elements to this thing. But, of course, this thing is just it's a very, very straightforward type of software or whatever in the trial form of it, right? And it's kind of talking to Zoom and all that. Again, I think probably the way that we're going to end up doing this for real, because it also drives traffic to our Discord channel, which is where we really want you guys interacting anyways. I created a couple of rooms for that. Even though we don't technically have a screener, I could just basically do that. I mean, it's rare that we get trolls on this thing. Comments, yes. During the live shows, no. But we do have at least a couple of things going for us. Ted basically writes, Ted Adam Green says, he kicks it off with a question. He says, has there ever been a TV series, movie, or story that has subverted expectations that was a financial and critical success with those who are already fans of the material? So I know that it's kind of like a long thing, but I think what Ted's trying to say is, has there ever been a situation where you basically have had story or whatever where the expectations were pretty low, and then it came out and ended up being a success? I'm not really sure. I don't know. Can you think of anything, even in Star Wars, that's happened?
I won't say Star Wars, but I will say Cobra Kai.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Because, I mean, with Cobra Kai, people almost thought it might be a joke. It might just be, something that might be almost comedic. And then it ended up being just something massive. But I don't know if that's what Ted's talking about, though. I think he's talking more about, people really thought it was going to be terrible. I mean, I guess you could still say Cobra Kai. There's a lot of people I just don't think had any expectations, really. But, yeah, that's definitely one of them.
Yeah. And just it's like, it's like, okay, you're doing this whole show about Daniel and Johnny like 30 years or so later. It's like, okay, what are you gonna have them do now? But then you have this whole story that's kind of weaved together around the original Karate Kid, movie that's well the first two, so to speak, and you get all of them if you really want. But um yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect from it, and I just, of course, me being a huge fan of it, I just didn't want them to screw it up, and I was kind of like leery, like, okay, well, what are you gonna have, William Zaka and Ralph Macchio do now, like at like 50 and 60 years old? Like, what are they gonna do? And then now it's like you see it, and you're just like, man, this is really, really, really good.
Yeah. Ted goes on to say, like, where heroes are twisted to be bad guys and bad guys twisted to be good guys. Like Jedi and Sith flipped, as it seemed the Acolyte sort of tried, sort of. I mean, I know what you mean. Like, with the Acolyte, I think the big thing with the Acolyte, honestly, was it was really trying to show you, or at least this is what we were promised, which, by the way, is part of the reason why I think it failed, is because it promised to give us the whole thing from the Sith perspective. Like, it wasn't trying to make them the heroes, really. It was just trying to give their perspective of it. Like, okay, this is how the Sith do things, and this is, how they train, and this is their philosophy. It just give us a little bit more of that. But as far as, like, well, you could still say Cobra Kai, actually. Because in that one, you're starting to see Johnny's point of view, and where in the first movie,
Mm.
he was sort of like, almost like a two-dimensional character, pretty much, just like your typical movie bully. They really expanded his character and turned him almost into the good guy, and in some ways, basically portrayed Daniel as the villain. So the Cobra
Well,
Kai
yeah, he's kind of an
easily,
anti-hero in a way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Johnny ends up kind of being like almost like an anti-hero in a way where his things made they're flawed, but his heart is in this, and you realize that like what Miyagi said was true. It's like, oh, no bad student is bad teacher, and you realize that it was Kreese who really corrupted Johnny, and all Johnny really wanted to do was just be, a great fighter. And then you kind of find out his background and realize that he was bullied by his stepfather, and that's the whole reason why he joined Cobra Kai in the first place. And so now it once again gives you that perspective of like, oh, okay, this is why he kind of was the way that he was, and now that he's older, he's gonna to understand like, okay, you know what? I don't have to be this way. So
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think that that's definitely something that they were trying to. It wasn't even that they were trying to flip the script on that character. They were just trying to, yeah, basically
expound upon
expand
it.
his, exactly, just kind of give us a little bit more on that character. But I don't know. I think it's really interesting to me to see how they're doing this, because with the Acolyte, I think they were trying to give us a little bit of that with the two sisters, essentially, right? Like you had
Hmm.
May, you had Osha, and they did sort of flip the script in a way, because May started out being what we thought firmly was the Acolyte, and then by the end, it was really Osha that ended up being the Acolyte, and May was sort of maybe not necessarily on their side, but certainly certainly benign. David says, "Hello, gentlemen. It's Star Wars Day. I'm so glad they canceled this garbage." Yeah, I'm sure. I am not surprised in the least by his
You're
comment.
here, David.
Yeah.
You're here.
And then of course Ted basically, says Johnny and Cobra Kai is a great example. Um, yeah. So I mean,
Glad I could help.
yeah, well, and I think that these are things that are important to point out, right? Where, like, you brought up Johnny, there's I'm trying to think if there's any other ones offhand that I can think of where they try to almost make the hero the villain the hero. They have done that quite a bit, actually. I mean, it's something that you see in various franchises, but it's not done Like, it's not done a lot. And it's certainly not done a lot in Star Wars. I mean, you could almost say they did that with Boba Fett in a lot of ways, you
Well, they
know?
almost kind of did that in Avengers too, though, because with the whole Sokovia Accords, like they try to make like okay, the superheroes, or they try to make the heroes viewed in the public almost like as evil, but it's like, well, not evil, but just they need to be controlled and need to be contained, and that whole Civil War thing kind of um went into it, especially the whole thing between Cap and Iron Man, and then Winter Soldier. Like when Iron Man found out about that Winter Soldier basically killed his parents, and it's like, okay, and
Yeah, that's a good one.
Captain
Yeah, I
America's
forgot
trying
about
to
that one.
defend him. He's trying to defend his friend Bucky, but it's like, well, he realized, look, it wasn't really Bucky who did. I mean, yes, he did it, but he was under the influence of this stuff. And but it's like, you lied, you didn't tell me about this, and you kept it from me, and then now their relationship is and so I mean, they played with it, and they never did a whole necessarily a movie about it per se. But I think Civil War kind of definitely flirted with those themes.
Yeah, it definitely did. I think, going to Ted's point that's something that you do see in some of these different franchises or whatever. But honestly, that has nothing really to do with the reason why this series was canceled. I mean, if we could, I mean, I'm sure we should probably go into some of that. I mean,
Oh yeah, I have a whole article that I found from Forbes that talked in great detail about
well,
that
and we'll
actually.
let you get to that too, because the other thing, the reason why I say, okay, the series is canceled, now what? Because this is really having a lot of ramification across the franchise. It's not just like, well, we're not going to. Because here's the thing that's interesting about this. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with the whole like woke agenda thing, even though it wasn't, it actually wasn't as heavily used in the series as I thought it was going to be when it first was announced. But I think people are really starting to rebel against this. I mean, Kevin Feige fired all the producers at at Marvel that even had a little hint of that. The other thing that's interesting where the Acolyte is concerned, I don't know, maybe this article that you're talking about has this in there. They removed all the merchandise. Like they took
Yeah.
all the Acolyte merchandise out. It's almost like they're starting to slowly delete this thing from existence. There's been talk that they might actually delete the entire series and it might be a tax write-off or something. I mean, this is really really um it's really a fascinating thing to see what's happening. It also happens to be the first time that a Star Wars series or any project has truly flopped. I mean, most of the time it's flopped, for Star Wars, but for any other thing, it'd be amazing, right? And you could still
Hmm.
hold on to that. I mean, you could still say, well, the thing, by episode 2 or 3 or whatever, it was, you know, pretty much like the highest or second highest or whatever rated thing. But yeah, after that, it nosedived.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so a lot of fans are saying that it's canceled because um they pushed for it to be canceled essentially, but ironically, what's been kind of put out there or leaked out is that it's not because of the fans or the viewership, it's because of money. And
$180 million,
oddly
dollars,
enough,
you think?
exactly, that we don't know where it went to
Well,
essentially.
it's only a matter of time
Um
before that was a factor.
yeah, exactly. But the thing is, Disney hasn't spoken about the whole cancellation either. Like they haven't said anything about it. Like they've never come out and said why they canceled it. They just kind of let the leak happen, and they just letting it do what it do. And I guess they just kind of like gonna let it float away with the rest of the garbage, as Han would say. So that's the interesting it's an interesting stance from Disney, the fact that they're not actually addressing it. It's almost kind of like why not continue to run for president? Like we never got the answer for that, even though we all know why. But he never said why he did it. It's just it's time for new blood. Like now, like so. In the sense of in this, it's kind of like all right, Disney decided like, well, we're gonna just cancel Acolyte. We're gonna be why?
Well, the thing that's weird about it though is that you would think, because if you look at season 2 of Obi-Wan, they're obviously not going to do that. I mean, sure, maybe there's an option in the future or whatever, but it's, even though Ewan McGregor really wanted to do one, that just doesn't seem to be happening. But they didn't really make a big thing about, the Obi-Wan series is canceled, and having like all these different elements or whatever. I mean, it just seems like this is different. I mean, I don't think they're going to make, they did make an announcement that the Boba Fett thing, well, I don't think they did. I think Tamira Morrison is the one that said, yeah, it's basically done. But I don't know. I mean, there just seems to be something very different about this cancellation than some of the other ones. And of course, everybody is just absolutely over the moon with glee about it because, number one, it ticked off all the agenda points, right? The whole, the Force is female. We're going to load this up with a female cast. We're going to get a female, show director. They're all going to be queer or part of the LGBTQ community. It's going to be like they were really trying to push this agenda. It didn't, like I said before, it didn't actually show up in the show as much as I thought it would, although it did a little bit. But behind the scenes, man, all the stupid interviews that they did where they're trying to say that like R2D2 was gay or something. I mean, just all of this nonsense that people don't want in Star Wars. It's like there's no point to this, right? There's no real story.
There's no rationale behind it.
There's no value to this. You're just trying to push this thing on everybody, and people push back in a very major way, and they continue to the point where Disney's actually making some huge changes. And I think that's, and of course, the people that are involved in the series are all, crying about the toxic fan base and content creators and all this. But it's like, look, guys, a lot of the toxic fan base and content creators that are just known for bashing Star Wars have been doing it since The Last Jedi. Like everything that's been coming out, Star Wars, the new Outlaws game, which, people have floated the idea of at least me getting on our channel or even through our Discord or something and, playing through and having our audience join us in that. There's a lot of people, the game's not even out yet, and there are a lot of people that are just bashing the thing just because it's Star Wars. And it's like, no, it's not because of that. It's because you had a poorly written show. That's why it was canceled. Even though I thought the story was generally okay.
Yeah, I mean, so like even in this article, they were just basically saying, and you bring up the toxic fan base. It says fans continue to try to save the Acolyte from cancellation by Disney, which is now spread to a number of media outlets, writing pieces about how this was a mistake by Disney. The move both gives in a celebrating anti-woke toxic fan base, while also demonstrating Disney has no ability to commit to expanding meaningfully outside of the increasingly stale Skywalker era. So then now even the cast members are chiming in about the Acolyte's cancellations with reactions ranging from bewilderment to clear annoyance. The first is the diplomatic but confused Lee Jung-jae, one of the stars of the first season, who was killed off in the finale. Even if he wasn't returning, he wanted the show to live on, and he was stunned that it wasn't going on. And then they also have a quote from him. Personally speaking, I really love Leslie's writing. I thought that she was a great writer and director who was very talented in storytelling, as well as creating characters, creating meaningful structures within the story. So I was actually personally really looking forward to watching season 2 with her at the helm. Honestly, I'm hoping that maybe there could be some changes in the future because you never know what's going to happen. So on a personal level, I really hope we could get to see further stories as the second season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what else is he going to say though? Right? I mean, is he going to be like, you know
Exactly. Like
what?
you kind of
I
have
mean,
to.
yeah, you
You're
kind of.
you're right. It did suck. You know.
It's like, you know
Because
what?
then
I
now
mean,
everyone's like,
look,
well, why didn't you say anything? You know. Or
right. See, I mean, you have to do that. You have to say, you got to toe the line, no matter how you
hmm
personally feel. You know, you're gonna. That's why you have to be very careful when you become a part of a project. That,
yeah.
especially if it's something that you're doing for a paycheck because you're desperate, but then it ends up becoming like your breakout role or whatever, and then now you're 30 years later, you're doing the convention circuit because that happened to be the role that made you or whatever. I mean, you just have to be very careful about that. So, exactly, what else are they gonna say, right? I mean, obviously, everybody's going to say, well, it was a, really good show. People didn't give it a chance. Um, it's
hmm
it's stuff like that. Well, all right, we haven't gotten any calls yet, but we do have another Twitch person. Usually it's funny because on Twitch, we usually have a couple of people, but basically our latest Twitch viewer says hello from Portugal. Nice to see some Star Wars
Wow.
fans too. Yeah, I know, and it's great because obviously Ronaldo was from Honduras. Now we have somebody from Portugal. We have a lot of people from India that have subscribed. It's wonderful, that you
Yeah.
guys are
Absolutely.
all, coming on board.
See, it has diversity.
Sure, Patrick. Yeah, exactly. Our show's got more diversity, right? Patrick
Yes,
McIntosh
indeed.
says hello there. But nobody's gonna call in.
Hey.
Nobody wants to be that guy. It's funny because on this
That
trial,
woman.
or woman, yeah, that's right. Because in the case of a couple of our viewers, we find out like later.
Yeah.
I mean, we still got a little time on this whole little trial or whatever. It's kind of limited. So like, once it's like basically on a time and money kind of thing that they give you, like credits or something. So, oh, we do have somebody. This ought to be fun. All right, let's try it. All right, you're on with us. Voyager, we were just talking about you. You can't hear us right now. Can you hear her, Daryl?
Nope. No, I
Yeah, that's
can't
what I
hear.
thought. Hold on. That's good. That's the important thing.
Anything?
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm gonna have to basically reiterate all that because unfortunately I heard it just fine and she heard me just fine. It was actually good to hear Voyager's voice, by the way. Kind of wish you guys could have. Everything worked. It's another one of those things too, right? It always works great on the test. I like tested this thing ad nauseum, and then finally something comes in. But basically, the gist of it was with Leslie Headland. Obviously with the writing and everything like that, and the fact that it's almost like, does she have some people in her circle or something that are powerful, or they, like, what was the deal? And I mean, again, like I said, it was great to hear Voyager. It was great to talk. I really hope I can actually get this thing working well, because this to me is actually a next level thing. If we can actually get people calling in and now we're having conversations, that would be awesome. And of course, I'm sitting here trying to troubleshoot this thing as I'm listening. And also mindful that during this whole time that she's asking this question, right, there's like all this dead air.
Which we realize the fans hate.
Yeah, which we know that the fans hate. But I mean, I think basically, Leslie actually had a lot of juice going into this thing. I mean, she did the
Mhm.
Russian dolls thing, which I haven't personally seen, but everybody tells me that was amazing. And in fact, a lot of people were excited that she was actually getting this series because of that whole thing, right? So,
And she's just actual huge Star Wars fan.
and she's a huge Star Wars fan. So I mean, really on paper, you don't think that this thing could really miss, I mean, again, and that's another thing. I mean, even if you go into the Acolyte storyline, if you just said the plot, like you just told somebody, yeah, this is what it's going to be about or whatever, it sounds great. I mean, it really does sound
Mhm.
good. I mean, it's not like it's something that I think that people would have just turned against or, said, oh, this is terrible. It's never going to work, whatever, whatever, whatever. I mean, I honestly think that if you just said it, people be like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm on board with this. But again, what ends up happening is for some reason with Disney Star Wars, it's the execution. It's the
Yeah.
execution of these projects. And I'll actually be one of the few content creators out there, one of the few YouTubers that says this. I don't necessarily entirely blame the showrunners. Because remember a long time ago, you and I kept saying that Star Wars has become like the Detroit Lions, at least the
Mhm.
older Detroit Lions. I mean, I know,
The old, the
they
old
were
Lions.
they were almost like in the Super Bowl last year, and they a little bumpy in some
They-
ways, but they're still working out their whole preseason thing. But they won both games, right?
oh, I think they lost the first one.
Did they lose
But
the
I think
first
they
one?
definitely won. I think they
Yeah,
lost
they
the
were
first
they
one,
were
but they
like
did
behind
win
with the
after that.
Steelers. I think they were behind like 14-0 or whatever, and then
They came back and won.
they
Yeah.
came back and won, that is a little like the older Lions. But the point is, we always said that what would happen is the Lions would get these guys that were like these amazing superstar players. And as soon as they got on our team, it's like they forgot how to play or something. Like now they can't catch a ball.
Mhm.
They get these college guys that are like winning the Heisman or whatever. Then they get on the Lions and they can't catch anything. So it's
Right.
like, all right, man, at some point you got to look at the management and what's going on behind the scenes. And I think a lot of that is the same as what's going on here. I think that in a lot of cases, it's Kathleen Kennedy. It's maybe even to a lesser degree, Bob Iger. It might even be a little bit Dave Filoni. We don't know. But the point is that as soon as these people come on board on Star Wars, now again, the other difference is, you're talking about these other creators, specifically like Leslie Headland and Ryan Johnson, because those two came with a lot of excitement just based on who they were, right? Leslie had Russian Dolls. Ryan Johnson had like Looper and stuff like that. And everybody was like, oh, sweet. This is going to be a cool thing.
Knives Out.
Yeah. Well, Knives Out came later. Knives Out was after The Last Jedi. Knives Out was kind of when we all went, oh, he didn't forget how to make a movie. It's like, but again, that proves a point, though. It's like, okay, you get away from Star Wars, all your movie mojo comes back. So I think a lot of it, too, is the constraints of the material. You and I have said this many, many times. You have to be of a special kind of filmmaker or showrunner, if we're talking about television, to make a successful Star Wars series or project. Because it's not just like you're coming in. First of all, you're not generating it. And I recognize the fact that with a lot of films, sometimes somebody will write something, submit it, whatever. It ends up getting greenlit. Then the next step is, hey, we got to hire a director. So you hire a director to come in. So it's not necessarily like their project per se, but for the most part, once they take over, they pretty much have autonomy, and then they are able to further their vision during the production process. But that's not the way that it goes here. And so that's why I'll be the guy that says, maybe it's not quite Leslie's fault. I don't know. Would you agree with that assessment? I'm so bummed that you didn't get to hear Voyager, man. I hope she calls back, actually, at some point once we get all this stuff straightened out. Because, again, it really is refreshing to not just putting up chats and stuff like that, but you're actually getting feedback directly from people, like, talking on the phone. I mean, like I said, if I can actually get it to where everybody else gets to hear it, well, then that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Do I think she's part of the problem? Yes. Do I think she's completely the problem? No. So that's my answer. And David's probably going to hate it because it sounds gray. But but the thing is, though, and here's why I say it, though. It's like, because she's part of the problem in the sense of she did kind of go into the whole, she fed into the whole woke agenda because she's part of the LGBTQ community. So she was all too happy to bring that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, that's the thing that Kathleen Kennedy kind of want to happen in Star Wars, right? So to that point, as a director, if you really truly understand Star Wars, this is the thing, you can love something, but to understand something is completely different.
Yes.
So, like, I can love, art, but understanding how to actually make something, like to sculpt something, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a classic indication, because if you were really a director that really understood Star Wars, you wouldn't put that in there. Despite that's your lifestyle, fine, cool, whatever. No one's telling you, you can't love who you love, like that. Do your thing. However, when you're dealing with a property that has certain elements, and anybody who knows me knows I'm a huge, here's my sports reference.
Well, if I made
Anybody
one,
who
you
knows
have
me,
to make one.
right? Of course, right? And I'm going with another Michigan team, and it's actually the Michigan Wolverines, right? The Michigan Wolverine formula for success is usually you have a quarterback who has a nice arm, a big arm. You have a running back who can pretty much, because Michigan is a run team. Back in the days, your boat Tim Beckler, like, they're a pound the ball, because in Michigan it gets cold. So you got to be able to run. When it gets cold, you're not going to be throwing the ball that much. So you have to have a big, strong, dominant offensive line, a nice sized running back. Then you usually have a big play receiver, usually someone tall, big, and strong, and a couple of good tight ends. And that's kind of like your formula when you were looking at Michigan football. That's their identity, right? The problem is that, and I understand that because I understand Michigan football. The thing is that Leslie, as much as she loves Star Wars, I don't think she understands Star Wars. And that's why we always bring up that whole show that we did. We did a whole series like What is Star Wars #1.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of, the catalyst was from it was I think it's called The Gallery we saw on Disney Plus. You had Dave Filoni and Favreau, and they were all sitting around this table. Even you had Carl Weathers, who sat around the table for Mandalorian. I think they did one for his show. But it was really just kind of just, they were giving exposition about what is Star Wars. It's not just TIE fighters and lightsabers and, making things levitate. It's more than that. And you really have to understand the heart of it. So to me, that's the part that she didn't understand. It's like, okay, that's why I say it's partially her fault. But then, of course, when you have a producer who doesn't understand Star Wars, and they're gassing you up to, make, the Force is female, the Force is all this. It's like, okay, you're pushing this, and you got somebody who could basically be your puppet. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. You got someone who could be your puppet, who's going to further your agenda, and you're force feeding us the crap, and now everybody's rebelling against it, and you're leaving Leslie out to dry for it.
Yeah. No, that's all true. Once again, Twitch viewer, I love this is great. Got somebody calling in. Oh, that didn't really work out as well as I thought, but we got Twitch chats. That's not something we usually get a lot. So he was like, what do you think of the Acolyte? I bet you already talked about that. But yeah, I would love to listen to your take. Yeah, well, so
we've got plenty of shows about it.
Yeah, we actually did review every, and again, I know you're on Twitch. You'd have to go to our YouTube channel and watch it there. Although Twitch, I know actually has, like, they keep a library of videos. They disappear after a while, but there are some that are on there. So yeah, we went through and we basically went through like every episode, reviewed each of the episodes. Now, overall, I remember the first 2 episodes you hated. I thought that there were a lot of issues with it, but I did see promise. Like, it showed some potential. You know, I thought, okay, it's okay. Episode 3, oddly enough, you'd think that would be the one that we would hate because that was the whole, you know, power of one, power of many, power whatever. That stupid song.
Thing.
Yeah, but we actually both liked that. Like, we thought the episode was good. Episode 4 was okay. It was sort of like their Lord of the Rings episode where they're just walking. Episode 5 was really good. That was probably like the best one, and that actually had some of the best combat in Star Wars, honestly. Yeah, that was phenomenal. And there was a lot of really good points to that sort of thing. I mean, you know, it's just, and then of course, you know, the finale wasn't that great. The other episodes were okay. They're to varying degrees, but I mean, the biggest problem was the writing and the execution. You didn't know who you were supposed to be rooting for, really. You know, the characters weren't really necessarily fully fleshed out. Again, I know how difficult a season 1 of any show can be because you're introducing a lot of concepts and a lot of things. The show wasn't really what we were promised. You know, at one point, of course, they were saying, hey, we're going to get everything from a more Sith-centric point of view, and then they started saying it's going to be like an archaeological thing, and you know, I mean, they were just giving us all kinds of crazy things. But I don't know, man. It's funny because, again, you know, I've been beat up in the comments section, or we have actually, about, you know, the whole being canceled in season 2 thing. But it's like, if you actually, you know, the funny thing about these people that comment is sometimes, I mean, if it's our regular viewers, you know, that's fine. And there's also people that they don't necessarily chat in, but they comment all the time, so I would count that as our regulars. But sometimes when it's these other people, which I think maybe they come through on promotions or something, I don't know, or they just discover us, and then they'll latch on to something, and I swear they're just latching onto the title, because I'm like, have you actually watched the episode? I mean, have you watched our show? Like, especially with the Acolyte, man. I mean, it's pretty scathing. Twitch viewer says, okay, maybe I have to give a second try. I'm really having a hard time seeing it. I mean, I would be interested to watch it now and just binge it. Which I guess I better do before they delete the thing.
Well, even in this article, you know, it says Rebecca Henderson, who didn't just play Vanessa Rowe on the show, she's also married to Leslie Hanlon, its showrunner. While she did not comment directly, she posted a number of stories clippings like the Rolling Stone story about Star Wars being able to survive its worst fans, and tweet about which part of the Disney listened to and how Disney should stop caving to pressure and stand your ground.
Oh, maybe. In an unrelated note, I think I see why Voyagers called it and go through the actual. Like, I heard it fine, but it didn't go through the system. Sorry. I know it's like a complete sidetrack thing, but I've been trying to figure that out because, it was fine. I feel like Han Solo with the Falcon, it's just kind of like. I don't know. Somebody else wants to try calling in to test. We still have some credits left. Now I really feel like we're in Star Wars. Or if Voyager wants to call back and try it again. I mean, it's who knows? Technology. Especially this is new software I've never even used before, ever. It's amazing I got it to work this much. But go ahead. I digress.
There's no indication that Disney canceled the Acolyte because it was being review bombed and yelled about on YouTube, probably by us. Again, the ultimate answer is likely cost versus viewership, but there was zero reason for the show that needed to cost $100 million and $180 million in the first place. And there should have been a way to get a second season to both resolve lines and ensure the concept of a High Republic live action content doesn't die. At the end result was still the toxic fans celebrating anyway, even if they weren't the driving force behind the cancellation. This is still the message it sends. Oh, that's still the message it sends. However, even to its own cast, which Disney did nothing to publicly support in the midst of the mass harassment as the show aired. Coming days, we may hear more from cast members. Amanda Steinberg previously posted a music video she wrote and filmed as a direct response to her haters, but she hasn't said or posted anything about the cancellation. Khmer actor Manny Jacinto posted the final shot of him and Steinberg holding hands with just a heart, a calm, if not a deeply sad reaction. Apparently, it was after all, season 2 was supposed to be spooling up as recently as a month ago. The toxic set of fans that will be upset or angry about everything all the time anyway, so who cares about them? This takes away a win there, and Lord knows that's what Star Wars should be doing at this point. They basically said, with the fans' appreciation for almost nearly nothing, it makes it hard for them to making a modern Star Wars almost impossible. Disney is silent. They were silent during the harassment. They've been silent about the cancellation. Hopefully, they won't stay silent after listening to the non-screen voices about a better way forward here.
No, and I agree. And actually, there's a comment from another viewer. I don't know if we've heard from this person before or not. Moby says, I am fine with lesbian witches. I like having a writer with a different background writing from their experiences. But the show just wasn't well put together. Not enough character development. And that was exactly the point that we were making too. And a lot of it is, it's kind of like this. If you look at the Aftermath trilogy of books, there is a gay guy in there. I think his name was Sanjir or something like that. He was an amazing character, an incredible character, a character that I wouldn't mind seeing in live action. It wasn't something that they crammed in there, for the message or, something like that. They were just, okay, we're just going to feature this. And there was a story-based thing. And that's the thing. I mean, it's like, okay, fine. But a lot of times what they're doing in this case is they're focusing more on that than the actual characters in the story itself. It's really more about putting in some sort of a message or furthering an agenda or whatever it is, and that's taking precedence over a good story and well thought out characters. And in that sense, what Moby was saying was exactly what we were saying throughout the whole review. It's like, I remember by episode 6, we were going like, dude, I don't even know who I'm supposed to be focused on right now. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of character motivations that didn't make sense. And that was another thing that was wrong with that show.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it left you with more questions than answers. And some things will just take you out of the story. What little story sometimes there is at times. You know, I think they set up some cool things at some points, then they abandon it. I think they had some cool characters, and then they kind of just get away with it.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, I think you're trying to drag some things on too long without. And I get it, like in filmmaking, right? Sometimes you want to make a build up for that. Like you only have one shot. Like let's say someone's going to kill someone, and let's use this Abraham Lincoln, right? We all know that he was assassinated, in the theater at the opera, right? Now we know that has to happen, but the build up to that one shot, because we already know it's going to happen. We need the build up to get to the point, almost to the point we almost don't forget that we know it's going to happen. That's good storytelling. It's like, even though we like, case in point, Revenge of the Sith. We know Anakin has to, at some point, he has to become Darth Vader, the Darth Vader that we know. We have to see him get maimed and mangled up and then end up in the suit. We know that has to happen at the end of the movie. It's the story that leads up to it. It's the heartache that we see him being torn between the Jedi and his father figure Palpatine. The Jedi asking him to, even though that was a deleted scene, but even the Jedi asking him to spy on Palpatine, right? That's the deleted scene I'm referring to. But even that, the fact that he's has all this distrust, the fact that he has to hide Padme, and the fact that he has a child on the way that he has to keep concealing, the fact that, okay, his best friend, Obi-Wan, is like, he's kind of on edge with him. The fact that the council they put him on the council, but they won't grant him the rank of master. These are the things that keep building up, so you understand, like, okay, why he makes the decision at the end to finally be like, you know what? And then, of course, now he has this whole vision of his wife dying, and his father, like, figure is telling him, well, I do know a power that could possibly save her, but you can't do it by being a Jedi. That's the build-up. When you finally get to the moment where he lops off Mace Windu's hands and he fully just dives into the dark side, and now he's killing kids, he's fighting Obi-Wan, and that whole battle between, the tension with, he was supposed to be the chosen one. Loved you, Anakin. And the Anakin, I hate you. Like, that's the gunshot. You knew it had to happen, but seeing it build up to that point was the gold. That was the moment. And we didn't get that in Acolyte. We didn't get that in a lot of different series. And that's the problem. It's like you're building, Andor, well, because even the whole build up to the prison breakout, like, the tension that keeps happening each episode. Yes, sometimes it's slow and methodical, but it's like, okay, there's some parts that are really juicy. It's like, okay, keep giving us something juicy to hold on to that leads to the big moment. So when that prison breakout happened, it was just like, okay, yeah, how the heck are they gonna get out of this? The same with the Heights when they stole the money. It was a slow burn, but they kept giving us tension. They kept playing with different things to allow us to feel those moments. So when it actually happened, we're like, okay, we're on. And then it delivered.
Mm-hmm.
The Acolyte doesn't do that.
Mm.
And that's the part when we're talking about, Eric, like the execution. Like on paper, yeah, it sounds good, but it doesn't transfer well on the screen.
No, and I mean that's one of the biggest problems, I think, is the fact that because another non-Star Wars example would be Titanic. I mean, now obviously they
Right.
had to come up with
Exactly.
something that was, you had to look through somebody's eyes, but it's
Right.
another thing to where you knew what was going to happen. I mean, there was no chance that,
Absolutely.
hey, maybe they'll get out of this. Like, We know,
Yeah,
but the idea
Apollo
is
13 is another one.
another one, exactly. Any of these like real life things, you know what's going to happen. But if you're following the right characters and you know when it's getting closer, I mean that adds a certain level of tension that's just great. So Moby's got a couple of other comments. Says exactly the outline of the story was fine, but there were little to no scenes to get from A to B, leaving characters' actions without believable motivations. Yeah, it's a really
There you
good way
go.
of putting it exactly.
Absolutely, Mobley.
I think part of the problem could have been poor management of their budget and time since it felt so sparse telling the story. Yeah, well, $180 million. We're still trying to figure out where that's
Exactly.
gone. If I were auditors or like part of the
I was about to
financial
say
team,
that. Like,
I'd be, from what I'm
I was
seeing
just
on the
about to say
screen,
that.
I'd be like, yeah, we're gonna have to audit this, man, because
Yeah,
I think
who pocketed this?
exactly.
How much did how much Squid Game cost? Because listen, maybe it went to his lessons for trying to get through the English language and speaking Star Wars. Maybe that was it. I don't know.
I don't know. All I could say is, look, there's there is a
That Harry
discrepancy.
Anderson's Wookiee thing.
Well, because if
that
you
was
even look at
terrible.
the costume design, right? I mean, there were times in the early, like some of the early episodes where I'm like, man, that's not even blending into the neck right. I mean, it's like, come on, 180 million. I don't know, but
Yeah.
again,
If you told me 50 million, I would believe you.
sure, like if it had the same budget as some of the other shows had, it's like $1 million an episode or a couple million an episode. I mean, if you think about it, how many episodes was of this thing? 8? I think it was 8. I don't think it was 10. I'm pretty sure it was 8. But I mean, that's an insane amount of money per episode. I mean, if you think about it, I mean that's just got to be crazy. And again,
I mean, they did travel a lot because they didn't do a lot of the volume, so maybe it had to be like travel expenses or something.
Well, I don't know, man, because
They
that's
did
like
shoot in real
20,
places.
22. It's like, yeah, like 22 million, maybe. It's
Yeah, it was
somewhere
8
in there.
episodes.
Yeah, per episode. So, I mean, that's just astounding.
Yeah.
I mean, 20 million. Let's just say for a nice round number. Nobody really saw that.
At all.
I mean, and there was. It's not like everything was
Mandalorian
terrible.
looked better for cheaper.
It did. And it had a better story, and it was more clear. And the execution and on all levels was much better, at least the first 2 seasons. I mean,
Right.
last
You had a
season,
CG Luke Skywalker in there, that's like fighting.
right. That's a good point. Exactly. They
That's
even
what
were
I'm saying,
de-aging
like,
characters. And
Yup, that's what I'm saying, man. You got a whole puppeteer, for Grogu, and hey,
they even had Bill Burr, like, in several episodes. I mean,
yep.
Carl Weathers. I mean, they had a lot more known actors than that.
Yep.
Even Liam Neeson popped up in Obi-Wan. It's like, it's like you said, how much did the Squid Game guy get? I mean, that's just, I don't know. That just blows my mind when you really stop and think about it. When you stop and think about how much money was thrown at this thing. And I think that, honestly, that was the key more than anything, because the viewership and everything did not meet expectations. They lost a lot of money, probably. And because it was so costly, this wasn't like, some sort of like $10-20 million series. I'd actually be interested to see how much the budget for the Andor series was, because that's something where they didn't use a lot of CGI or the volume or anything like that. They went to practical locations. They did a lot of other stuff. I mean, so Disney really lost a ton of money, and I honestly think that was really disappointing. But what I really hope is that they actually learn their lesson. Let's see what Moby's got to say. Moby says Andor's 230 million, I think.
250 million.
250 million. All right, well,
Yep.
but at least I can see that. Like, you could see that
Exactly.
because of all the points that I just mentioned. The fact that there's, like, practical locations. They're going all over the place. I mean, you know, it's crazy. David says, the Acolyte is why I hate diversity for diversity's sake. Marvel's Eternals sucked because they just wanted diversity, so they could say it was diverse. Drinking game.
That.
Every time David says diverse,
right, I was like, you say
will be obliterated by the end of that comment. But he's not wrong, though. And I don't usually say that, at least not with Andor. But the Acolyte, I think David was pretty much on the same page as us. Moby says, per episode was cheaper. Okay, so yeah. Well, yeah, right, because Andor actually had like 12 episodes. So yeah. Yeah,
Ahsoka was 250.
Interesting. All right, so maybe I guess I was wrong. So I don't know. Well, what was The Mandalorian then? Like season 1.
Which season?
Well, it's season 2. Do season 2 because that really had the whole like. Well, it only had CGI Luke at the end, but they went a lot of places on that one. I mean, you can.
I'm about to say it's 15 million per episode.
All right. 15 million an episode. 93 million. And again, better than all of them. You know, it's just kind of like you don't need, if you know how to tell a story effectively and completely, you don't need, I mean, the thing that's funny is that, like, some of these shows actually exceeded the budget of some of the earlier films. But it just goes to show you. Well, yeah, I mean, granted, you know, of course. But, you know, it's just like ticket sales. I always say that, too. You know, everybody will talk about, oh, you know, this did like $1 billion box office. I'm like, well, yeah. When movie theater tickets are generally like, you know, $13, $14 or whatever on average, back then they were like
but back in
$3.
the 70s,
you know, like $3.
Right.
You know, and it's making, you know, $500 million on a $3 ticket. You know, that's where I think there's a little bit of a discrepancy. But yeah, I don't know. Well, what do you think? You know, we're talking about the Acolyte. What do you think that this is going to mean now for Lucasfilm moving forward? Because obviously,
get the crap together, man. I mean, it just shows that now that things can, you know, well, I hope this serves as notice that, like, even though they're using it, the ploy, and I won't necessarily say it was a ploy, because I can understand, like, okay, you paid $180 million for this thing, and the thing is, it was crap. So you blew $180 million. So I think that's the thing, is like, even though they're saying like, oh, the budget, but it can't be necessarily just the budget alone, because as we just figured out, these other shows that you have cost more, significantly more. Like I said, $250 million versus 180 is significant. Now, the thing is, people actually, it wasn't as visceral though. This though was like just in the toilet by everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, you know, you look at, I mean, everybody, you know, to other varying degrees, people kind of liked the other shows. But it seemed like this one just had the ire of everybody. Like, everybody was just out to get it. And then, of course, you did have its proponents. And you have a lot of people on there now, hey, thanks toxic fan base for canceling our show, and it's like, you're underestimating the power of what a lot of people were talking about. You think that it's
You don't know the
because
power.
well, I mean, I think a lot of people think that everybody was just being negative or whatever. And look, I will be the first person to admit there's a lot of people like that are out there in the fan base. A lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's people that will trash things. Look, even the Acolyte. Now, we all know where it ended up, but I mean, where it began, there are people that were trashing the Acolyte before it even premiered. So it's like, okay,
that's
guys.
because you have people like Leslie Hetland basically giving you that.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, it's going to be this.
I know. I was
like she
did. She
ruined
did.
it before it even debuted.
Well, and it's also if you think about it, like even Amanda Stenberg or whatever, like you listen to her interviews, it doesn't sound like she really has any love for Star Wars. It's like, I mean, and half of them, like, what's his name? Manny,
Jacinto?
Yeah. He was the one that was all like talking about, he meant Luke Skywalker, but he said like when Anakin Skywalker blew up the Death Star or something like that. I mean, again, I'm not trying to be like one of those like crazy, nerdy, almost like what people used to accuse the Trekkies of. To where you're just like, I don't want to be that guy really, but come on, dude. Like, even casual fans. Yeah, this isn't like you're mistaking, some lesser character or something, that nobody would know. I mean, this is just like, hey, dude, you're kind of in this thing. You do have somewhat of a responsibility to at least know the basics.
It's almost like saying like, oh, when they go into warp, like, you mean hyperspace?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Moby says, I think Disney will take less risk, but that's not a bad thing. Put the money in projects like Andor. I hope David? So. No, that was, yeah, right.
No.
David's going to like, no, not Andor. But honestly, I think that if you really look at it, just the way that everything's shaking down, right? Marvel fired all of its woke producers and stuff like that. I mean, I think what this could mean is that people will now focus hopefully more on the story. It's not even so much focusing on the more popular or greater characters, because again, this is something that we talk about all the time. On one hand, we say things like, they need to move beyond the Skywalker saga, right? Like, they've got to stop using that as a crutch. But at the same time, you also have to be respectful of what's happened. You have to, when you're expanding the lore, you're still responsible to it. And another thing, which was I thought of actually doing a whole show on it. Who knows? Maybe it could be tomorrow's show. I don't know. But apparently, Favreau let slip that in one of the next series or something like that, he was overheard as talking about bringing Han, Luke, and Leia back as DH characters in some as yet unnamed project or something. Like, it was a really credible kind of thing, because somebody was complaining about it because when they were revamping Galaxy's Edge or something, and they're all like, well, you're already trying to bring Han, Luke, and Leia back. Now you want us to spend money on this or something was overheard like that. And that's interesting. Because again, on one hand, for me, where I stand personally, I wouldn't mind more stories with the classic characters, like in between, say, Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. Or even earlier, like what the comics are doing. Like the whole Crimson Dawn type thing where they had like War of the Bounty Hunters and stuff like that. That whole comic series that takes place between basically Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Great storytelling. They could do that. But, it's like, if you're going to make new characters, if you're going to introduce us into the High Republic, which really was an important step in, because that's another thing that we should really discuss at least a little bit. Do you think that the High Republic is actually going to take a hit for this now? At least as far as television or films?
I think anything with Star Wars is going to take a hit, to be honest. I mean, like, if we're talking about, I mean, I'm not.
No, I know. I
Like,
understand. I mean, that's why I'm laughing, because it's true.
I think anything that, like I said, once again, it's the inconsistency of the franchise, and you have the unfortunate thing is you have more failures than you have success.
At this
I mean, because
point,
you got to think about it. Like, look at it. Like, you have the Last Jedi, the Rise of Skywalker. You got Book of Boba Fett, Acolyte, and some people you might even conclude the Ahsoka series. So you got 5 projects that you've put out within the last few years that really hasn't catapulted Star Wars into the next, stratosphere. The only projects that you have that's been reasonably accepted and loved by people is Mandalorian and Andor.
yeah.
And Obi-Wan.
Well, and to that, Moby says, I hated Kenobi. So much potential, but writing was also awful. And I mean, I agree with that to a point. I mean, there was a lot of things I liked about the Kenobi series, but I remember when you and I reviewed it. Because again, I mean, if you guys missed any of our shows where we did this stuff, or you just want to see what our take was on an episode-by-episode basis, it would be worth it to go back and watch that. Especially Obi-Wan. First of all, there was only 6 episodes, which I think was a mistake. You had a lot of story that you needed to try to cram into like 6 episodes. The second thing is, I agree with Moby when basically you're talking about potential versus what we actually got. Because you can judge things on the merits by what we actually got on Disney Plus as the Obi-Wan series, right? You look at it, I thought they handled Vader really well. I thought there was a lot of elements of the story that were cool. But at the same time, did it really live up to the expectations? I don't think so.
That's fair. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think, by and large, I mean, people, and that's what I'm saying. Like, even in that, like, okay, let's just say it's split half and half. Then you can't really call it a success because you don't have more in the success column. You know what I mean? So it's.
Oh yeah, I would not call Obi-Wan a success. I mean, Obi-Wan definitely didn't live up to, even if you're talking about from a business standpoint, it didn't live up to the business expectations. Moby says.
So that's what I mean is.
He says it had all the characters I wanted, but still bad. Still bad. Yeah. Well, and I think that's. Yeah. I think that was a consensus.
So that's what I mean. It's just like right now, it's just like Star Wars is at a point where like it's sinking faster than it's swimming. And it's it's kind of like when you toss a kid into the pool and you're like, okay, swim to the other side, and like you're hoping like, okay, you got that kid is either gonna sink to the bottom and you got to jump in and go get him, or you're hoping like, okay, you know what, it figures out how to doggy paddle and kick, and it comes up with that fortitude to push forward and like, I'm not gonna die here. I'm gonna get to the other side because my parents are jerks for throwing me in the water.
Exactly.
So,
well, but you know what though? I mean, there is a lot of truth to that. I mean, I think that when you're talking about the sinking versus swimming and all that stuff, yeah, they definitely have to get their act together now. Voyager comes in on the chats where we can all see her. I still feel so bad about that too. It was a really good conversation, by the way. Just too bad I was the only one that could hear it. She says, it seems Mandalorian and Grogu is the only sure thing happening in Star Wars future. I would agree with that. There's been no news on Ahsoka Season 2 filming, even though it was renewed 9 months ago.
Valid point.
Yeah.
Valid point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was no... Look, we're still waiting for Lando, and that was announced twice. First, it was announced at one of the celebrations or something like that. Then it was announced again when they said, no, we haven't forgotten about it. In fact, the Glovers are working on it. So we're still waiting for that. David says, I noticed y'all didn't put Andor on the list of failures. I wouldn't call Andor a success. Hey, no. You can't argue with us on this one because we're talking business and marketing now, David. This is from a business and marketing standpoint, much like the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. It was a success. Now, it may not have been a personal success for you, but it was actually a success. Oh, man, I can't wait. I can't wait till season 2 comes out with our some of the best episodes was us arguing with David for an hour. It was great. I noticed David didn't call in. Well, not that it would. Right now, it probably wouldn't have done much good anyway. I would have been the only one to hear him. Voyager says, have you seen the Save the Acolyte petition? 40,000 signatures, apparently. Yes, I did. Yes, I did see the Save the Acolyte petition.
There's 70 million who says get rid of it. That's one.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, 40,000 sounds like a lot. And it is amazing, given when you look at the percentage on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's like a 15% approval from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
40,000. But then again, when you look at it, that's a good... You know what? I really wish I had looked up the numbers on the first couple episodes, because they did say that it had broken a couple of records or something like that. It was like the most viewed thing, period. But again, a lot of times they're going to hang on to that. But the reason why it was one of the most viewed things is because everybody was curious about it.
Curious and excited.
Yeah. And of course, the marketing department did their job in that case. And then what happened? Honestly, I think Voyager is right. I think that Mandalorian and Grogu is probably...
That's what happened.
Exactly. I mean, is the lemon law apply in this case? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would definitely agree that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is probably at least as close to a sure thing as possible. But don't forget, if it was a straight to Disney Plus movie, I would say 100%. It is going to be a real movie, though. So we'll have to...
so much so that they saw from it already at, D23. So,
and it did get some positive, people were into it. So it's probably true. David says, y'all met your match during Andor. Some of my best work schooling you all, especially Darryl. Well, I appreciate the especially Darryl part.
Only in your mind, my very young Padawan.
It begins. When's that coming out? Like in 2025 at some point?
Yeah.
Well, actually, 2024 is almost over. Moby says, Andor will be more successful when Season 2 drops. Actually, I think that Andor Season 2 will do better, numbers-wise, than Season 1. Not just because of the show being established and everything like that, but also because you're going to start to see a little bit more of a tie-in to Rogue One. You're going to start to see fan-favorite characters like K2SO, Krennic, people like that come back in. So the familiarity, I think, is actually going to drive the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, it should be, I don't know, it should be a very interesting thing when we look and see where Star Wars is going to go, say, within the next half a year. On one hand, you already have a bunch of projects that are basically locked down. There's still, in a lot of cases, the movie releases, we have dates and we have projects, but nobody, other than the Mandalorian and Grogu one, I'm not aware of any other project that's really been announced and tied to a specific date. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's not the only one.
Yeah, I think that's the only one.
time frame, but no. There's
Right.
one, I think, December 22nd of 25. Oh, no, no,
No,
no.
no. May 26th, I think,
No, that's
is going to be.
no. I'm thinking about I'm thinking Skeleton Crew. I'm sorry.
Well, Skeleton
Skeleton Crew
Crew
comes
is
out.
like in a couple of months, December.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's in December. That's the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, of this year.
It's so many different shows. I'm trying to keep them.
I know. And Skeleton Crew, now that one, I think, actually, again, I really didn't care at all about it. And now all of a sudden, I'm actually looking forward to it. So the trailer did its job on that one. David says, I am a Jedi Master, Darryl. You should show more respect to your superior. LOL. Yeah, can you imagine if David was actually calling in the kind of... You would want the control so you can hang up on him.
Oh, no.
See, if we start to do this on Discord, you would have that power, actually, because you're one of the moderators.
Well, see, no, I would just... I would beat David to the point where he just decide, you know what? I want to be a Democrat now.
And beat him into the... So a left hook then?
Yo! Nice. Nice.
Look, we know that David hates Andor. We know that David's not too nuts about Ahsoka either. And we know, of course, Daryl's not too fond of Visions. Moby says, isn't Skeleton Crew a kids movie? Technically, yes. But it's basically kind of like a... Well, yeah, right. I mean, Star Wars is basically a kids movie. Everybody loses sight of that because it's so well done.
Yeah.
And there's so much depth to it. But really, that was George Lucas's target audience when he made the first trilogy. But that said, Skeleton Crew is a little bit more of a Goonies, Stand By Me, Super 8, that kind of a thing. Yeah, it's just like one of those things, but it looks good. Like at first I was really skeptical because of that. Because I thought, I don't know, man. I don't really know. I mean, when Jude Law was attached to it, I'm like, okay, well he's not just going to attach himself to anything. And he's a Star Wars fan, which I didn't actually know. So, and him seeing where Star Wars is going lately, he probably was like, yeah, let me keep rereading that script. Voyager says, praying to the streaming gods that they release Skeleton Crew as a binge. Yeah, that's something that I really wish that they would do. I honestly, and I said this in one of our other shows, I think that Star Wars would do a lot better on television if they did it that way. Because I haven't done it with a lot of the shows, but I did do it with Mandalorian, and I think I did it with Obi-Wan. When you watch it basically in one chunk, or, a couple of sittings, depending on how long everything is, it really adds to the show. I mean, it enriches it. It puts everything in context. I mean, I get it. I understand the strategy. It's so everybody can be talking about the same thing at the same time. They can stretch it out. Because, that's the biggest issue. That's why they're doing Cobra Kai the way they're doing it.
Well, they also trying to make it so it competes with the big guns, too, like your House of Dragon, your...
Yeah, right.
Well,
if they really wanted to do it, they would get Benioff and Weiss to actually do a Star Wars show. Maybe
they would just do a Star Wars right, then you could compete, but you can't, right?
Yeah, but I mean, you're right though. That is what they're trying to do. They saw how that model worked, and I think that because it puts everybody's watching it at the same time, everybody's on the same page, so it works a little bit better that way. But honestly, I just don't think that Star Wars is a brand. I don't think that the type of show that it is, that's necessarily the smartest way to do it. You know what's weird about it?
I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I mean, I actually love that if they kept it that way. The problem is that I don't want to wait the next week to see something that sucks. Like, give me something good. I wouldn't care. But if you give me I gotta wait the next week and then it's a bunch of garbage, it's like, well, yeah.
Well, in a way, if they are going to make a garbage thing, this is still the best way to go because it gives you time to come down from your anger
Yeah,
You
right.
know, I mean,
Gives you time to hit the bar and
yeah, you know,
go
you're
drown
bracing
my
yourself and
sorrows.
everything like that. Exactly. But I mean, I don't know. Here's the thing that I find that's funny. And I know they do it because they're only like 10 or 15 minutes apiece. But something like Tales of the Jedi or something, they'll release that
Mhm.
all at once. And that's the kind of a thing that you could do from week to week. But yet they'll take the more
But seriously,
serialized stuff and they try to, you know, and again, I get it. They're trying to drag it out. You know, it's better because once you put something out and everybody binges it, you get these really good numbers like the first month and then it sort of tapers off. Whereas this way, you get a little bit more marketing life out of things. But again, I mean, when it's done, it's almost the same effect.
I mean, I think Tales of the Jedi though, because they're such short episodes. I mean, that it makes sense to binge it like that way.
Oh yeah, it does. I'm
However,
just saying that I think
with
that,
but
but
with
yeah,
something like this, like with these shows like Andor and Ahsoka and Acolyte, I think they're like once again, I think they could be. I wouldn't have like I said, I don't wouldn't have a problem with it at all the way it is now because it leaves you hankering for more, and that's what Star Wars does. Even in the film, like it kind of leaves you wanting more. The problem is that prior to the sequel, everything was relatively good. It's just
well, I don't know.
now that you're putting out crap, it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't want to waste my time trying to sit down and make sure I watch this show. And it's like, I'd rather waste, if it's going to be like this, I'd rather waste my time in one sitting than every week. I got for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I got to waste my time. You know what I mean?
No, I get it. But, you know, as far as the time thing goes, I mean, yeah, okay, Tales of the Jedi is like 15, 17 minutes. But I mean, a lot of these live action show episodes are only 25. I mean, it's not like you're talking about the difference between a 15-minute and 45-minute show or something. I mean, in a lot of cases, you might get like 7 additional minutes. My point was that
Mhm.
Tales of the Jedi, it's more episodic. I mean, obviously, there's like a serialized thread running through that too, though. But it's a little bit more broken up. Whereas I think that a lot of these shows are like one big movie. You know, yeah, you would get time in between the films, but that's because you saw the whole film and then it left off on, you know, whatever. And you're like, I wonder what's going to happen in the next one. Now, it depends on how you look at things, right? Do you look at a season compared to a trilogy or do you look at a season compared to a movie? I think that would be the best marker, I suppose, as to whether or not you would make the argument for binge versus week to week. Let me get
Yeah.
this. Let me get this one in here from Moby. He says Andor had long run times. Yes, it did, and that was one of the reasons
Mhm.
why I think it was good. Not only did it have long run times, it had like 12 episodes,
Mhm.
and there wasn't a lot of filler in that show either.
Mm-mm.
I think there might have been one episode that I was like, eh. But I mean, a lot of the other
Yeah.
stuff, man, you know, you're like, okay, you're trying to tell all this story. You're only going to give me like 6 to 8 episodes, and then you're going to make them like 25 minutes. I mean, and then keep in mind that all that 25 minutes, a good like 3 minutes in the beginning is like their little credits and recaps and all that stuff. And then like, you know, you're watching the thing and all of a sudden, you know, you see the executive producer credit or whatever, and you're looking, there's still like 5 minutes left in the show. I remember I was like forwarding through a lot of times going, man, is there like mid-credit scenes? Is there, you know, I mean, what are they doing? It's like, what are you guys doing? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
It should be interesting though. I am looking forward to see what Lucasfilm is going to do moving forward because again, I think that the failure of the Acolyte, I think taught him a lesson. And I really hope that they learn from that lesson and maybe they start to shift their focus more to storytelling and everything, and less on any particular message they want to do or trying to make a blockbuster, because that's another thing that they always do. They're trying to make something that brings in a lot of money, which, look, I mean, from a business perspective, we understand that, but you have to remember that when Lucas was doing it, he was making it for himself, really. And then if everybody else liked it, great, you know? Let's get this one before we wrap. Moby says, I want an Andor level writing and tone with Jedi and saber fights. What's the problem, Disney? Exactly. That's what we hoped the Acolyte would have been. And now we had this big cliffhanger with Yoda. You know, now I'm thinking, okay, now maybe the Acolyte might get a little bit interesting in season 2. Now we're never going to know. I mean, unless, I guess they can take the Acolyte and move it forward into books or comics or something like that. But, you know, the way that it's been vilified, who knows if they want to even put the money into that. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. I mean, like I said in the article, you know, anything possible, and it could bring it back, because Disney hasn't said anything, so we'll see.
You know, what was it that Luke Skywalker said? No one ever really dies.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, hey, there is always a chance that, you know, everything can happen. But thanks, guys, for being with us tonight. Of course, we will be live again tomorrow at 8. You know, thanks for suffering with us. An extra special thanks to Voyager, who actually called in. I wish it had worked out a little bit better. I was able to hear the conversation. I mean, it was great for me, but it just really, you know, the point of it was really for everybody to be able to hear. So we are going to nail that down. We are going to get that going, so that way you guys can actually call in live. So just bear with us as we try some different things and figure out how to best integrate it into the show. In the meantime, of course, I got to do what every YouTuber does. Don't forget to hit the like button, because the like button, in addition to the subscribe button, really do help the algorithm. Everybody tells you that, but that's because it's true. And then if you want to know when we're going on live, because sometimes that can be a little bit of a scavenger hunt, you'll want to hit the notification bell. So with that, not really sure what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. I don't think did we float anything around, or do we have any ideas? It seems to me like we did. I might have to go back through our texts or something, because I thought I said something about, okay, great, we could do this Sunday, and then Monday we can do whatever. But I don't know. Watch us tomorrow night and find out.
Same bat time, same.
Yeah, same, exactly. You know, we'll be here. Oh, and we also want to thank anybody that has watched, and of course, the person who chatted in on Twitch. That was awesome. We always love our Twitch viewers. And yeah, with that, I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll keep working on this call-in thing, and just keep an eye on the channel. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.